A millionaire's son had never taken a single step since he was born, but the arrival of a new cleaning lady brought a different perspective to what all the doctors said was impossible. She did something simple, yet surprising, that completely changed the child's destiny. And when the father saw the result with his own eyes, he was in total shock. William Parker stood at the window of his Manhattan penthouse, overlooking Central Park as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. The magnificent view had lost its ability to move him years ago. His mind was elsewhere, as it always was these days, with his son, Ethan. The sound of wheels rolling across hardwood floors broke his reverie. William turned to see 8-year-old Ethan maneuvering his wheelchair with practiced ease into the living room. "Dad, are you already working?" Ethan asked, his bright blue eyes, so much like his mother's, peering up at William with an innocence that still took his breath away. William quickly tucked away his phone, where he'd been reviewing acquisition reports since 4 a.m. "Just checking. A few emails, buddy. How did you sleep?" "I had that dream again," Ethan said, wheeling himself to the breakfast table where their personal chef had laid out an array of options. "The one where I'm playing soccer." William felt the familiar pang in his chest, a mixture of guilt, sorrow, and helplessness that had become his constant companion since Ethan's birth. The spinal malformation had been detected during Rebecca's pregnancy, but nothing had prepared them for the reality of raising a child who would never walk. Rebecca hadn't been able to handle it. She'd left when Ethan was barely 2, claiming the pressure was too much. William never blamed her, not really. She'd been young, unprepared for the challenges. He'd thrown himself into 2 things: growing Parker Enterprises into a billion-dollar technology empire and finding a cure for his son. "Dr. Stevenson called yesterday," William said carefully, watching Ethan spread jam on his toast. "He wants to discuss a new treatment they're developing in Switzerland." Ethan's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly, but William noticed. Of course he noticed. He catalogued every reaction, every potential sign of depression or disappointment in his son. "Is it like the one in Germany?" Ethan asked, his voice small but steady. "The one that made me sick for 2 weeks?" William swallowed hard. "No, this is different. It's a new approach to neural regeneration. Very promising." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. How many promising treatments had they tried? How many specialists had looked at Ethan's scans and given William that same practiced expression of professional sympathy before explaining in increasingly technical terms why his son's condition was irreversible? "Can I skip this one, Dad?" Ethan looked up, a weariness in his eyes that no 8-year-old should possess. I just want to be normal for a while. School's starting, and Ms. Peterson said I could be team captain for the science fair this year." William's instinct was to insist, to remind Ethan that they couldn't give up, that somewhere out there was the answer that would let him walk. But the resignation in his son's voice stopped him. When had Ethan started carrying the weight of William's expectations? When had the child begun consoling the father? "We'll talk about it later," William said finally, checking his watch. "I've got to head to the office for a few hours. Mrs. Winters will be here, and I've asked her to start interviewing candidates for the new household position today." Their previous housekeeper had left suddenly to care for her ailing mother in Florida, leaving them short-staffed. The Parker penthouse ran like a well-oiled machine, with a rotation of professionals managing everything from meals to Ethan's physical therapy sessions, but William preferred having consistent faces around his son. "Can I help interview them?" Ethan perked up at the idea. "Last time Mrs. Winters hired someone who kept calling me poor dear and trying to do everything for me." William smiled despite himself. Ethan hated being coddled, a trait he definitely inherited from his father. "I'll let Mrs. Winters know you'd like to meet the final candidates." As William gathered his things, his phone buzzed with a message from his CFO about the pending merger with TechVision, a deal that would add another couple billion to the Parker Enterprises valuation. He should have felt excitement, or at least satisfaction. Instead, all he felt was the same gnawing emptiness. What good was all this wealth if it couldn't buy what mattered most? He knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair, a custom titanium model with all the latest adaptive technology. "I'll be back for dinner. We can watch that space documentary you've been talking about." Ethan nodded, but his attention had already shifted to the tablet in his lap, where he was coding a simple game, another hobby William had encouraged, seeing the potential for a future where his son's brilliant mind could overcome the limitations of his body. In the elevator down to the private parking garage, William's thoughts drifted to the upcoming board meeting. Parker Enterprises was on the verge of launching a revolutionary AI system that would transform medical diagnostics. The irony wasn't lost on him. His company was advancing healthcare for millions, yet couldn't solve the one medical challenge. That mattered most to him personally. The sleek Tesla hummed to life as he approached. His driver, Thomas, stood ready by the open door. "Good morning, Mr. Parker. Straight to the office?" "Yes," William replied, sliding into the back seat. "And Thomas, could you ask my assistant to schedule another call with that research team in Tokyo, the ones working on the spinal nerve regeneration project?" "Of course, sir." As the car pulled away from the building, William stared at the passing cityscape without really seeing it. New York City was alive with possibility, a place where dreams were made and fortunes won. William Parker had conquered this concrete jungle, yet felt more powerless than ever. His phone rang. Dr. Hoffman from Johns Hopkins, calling with results from Ethan's latest tests. William took a deep breath before answering, preparing himself for another conversation filled with medical jargon that ultimately translated to no progress. Meanwhile, back in the penthouse, Ethan wheeled himself to the large windows, gazing down at the children playing in Central Park. He watched a group of boys about his age kicking a soccer ball, their movements free and uninhibited. He pressed his palm against the glass, feeling the cool surface against his skin. Someday, he whispered to himself, a private mantra he'd never share with his father. William tried so hard, pushed so much, wanted it so badly that Ethan sometimes felt the weight of his father's hopes crushing him. Someday. Neither father nor son could have possibly imagined that someday would arrive sooner than expected, or that it would come in the form of a 30-year-old woman with no medical degree, no connections, and a cleaning cart. Grace Martinez adjusted her simple black uniform in the mirror of the service elevator. This job interview at the Parker penthouse was her last hope. After being laid off from the hospital where she'd worked as an orderly for 5 years, she'd struggled to find steady employment. Her savings were depleted, and next month's rent loomed ominously. The agency had been clear. This position paid exceptionally well, but Mr. Parker was notoriously demanding. Few staff members lasted longer than 6 months. The elevator doors opened directly into a service area, where an austere woman in her 60s waited, clipboard in hand. "Grace Martinez." The woman's eyes made a quick, assessing sweep. "Yes, ma'am." Grace straightened her posture instinctively. "I'm Mrs. Winters, the household manager. Your references from St. Mary's Hospital were impressive. Follow me." Grace followed Mrs. Winters through the immaculate penthouse, mentally calculating the square footage, at least 5 times the size of her modest queen's apartment. Everything screamed money, from the original artwork to the custom furniture, yet the space felt oddly sterile, lacking the lived-in warmth of a true home. "The position requires discretion above all," Mrs. Winters explained as they walked. "Mr. Parker values his privacy and his son's. You'll be responsible for maintaining the East Wing, including Master Ethan's quarters. The boy has special needs, as you were informed." "Yes, the agency mentioned he uses a wheelchair." Grace kept her voice neutral. Mrs. Winters paused, turning to face Grace directly. "Many find it difficult to work around the boy's condition. Mr. Parker has spent millions seeking treatments. It's a sensitive subject." Grace understood the unspoken warning. Don't give false hope. Don't overstep. "I worked in pediatrics at St. Mary's," Grace said, simply. "I'm comfortable around children with various medical conditions." Mrs. Winters seemed satisfied with this response and continued the tour, detailing the exhaustive list of duties and expectations. The salary mentioned at the end nearly made Grace gasp. It was 3 times what she'd made at the hospital. "Mr. Parker insists that his son have the best of everything," Mrs. Winters explained, misinterpreting Grace's reaction. "That includes staff who are compensated well enough to ensure loyalty and excellence. They turned a corner into a sun-filled room where a boy sat in a wheelchair, focused intently on a complex Lego structure. His sandy brown hair fell across his forehead as he worked, his tongue poking slightly out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. "Master Ethan," Mrs. Winters announced. "This is Grace Martinez, interviewing for the housekeeping position." The boy looked up, and Grace was struck by the intelligence in his clear blue eyes. He assessed her with the same thoroughness Mrs. Winters had, but with an openness the older woman lacked. "Do you like soccer?" Ethan asked without preamble. The question caught Grace off guard. Yes, my younger brother played professionally in Mexico for a while." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? What position?" "Forward. He was very fast." Grace smiled at the memory of Miguel darting down the field, his movements like liquid lightning. "I watch every New York FC game," Ethan said proudly. "Dad gets us box seats sometimes, but I prefer watching on TV where you can see all the plays better." Mrs. Winters cleared her throat. "Master Ethan, Ms. Martinez is here for an interview, not to discuss sports." "But Dad said I could help choose," Ethan protested, then turned back to Grace. "The last lady treated me like I was made of glass. Are you going to do that too?" Grace looked directly at Ethan, seeing past the wheelchair to the spirited boy within. "I don't think you look particularly fragile to me." A grin broke across Ethan's face, transforming him from solemn to impish in an instant. "I like her, Mrs. Winters." The household manager's expression remained impassive. "I'll make a note of your preference. Now you have your physiotherapy session in 10 minutes. After Ethan had wheeled himself out, Mrs. Winters completed the interview with a series of pointed questions about Grace's reliability and discretion. By the time Grace left the penthouse, she felt drained but hopeful. There had been a connection with Ethan, something genuine amid the opulence and formality. 2 days later, Grace received the call offering her the position. She started the following Monday. The first weeks passed in a blur of learning routines and navigating the complex dynamics of the Parker household. William Parker himself was rarely present during the day, often returning late after Ethan was asleep. When father and son did interact, Grace observed their conversations from a distance, stilted exchanges that revolved around doctor's appointments and treatment options, rather than the everyday joys and concerns of childhood. Ethan's daily schedule was regimented: tutoring, physiotherapy, prescribed rest periods. The boy adhered to it all with a resignation that troubled Grace. Where was the spark she'd glimpsed during their first meeting? She found her answer one afternoon when she entered his room to clean and found him watching soccer highlights on his tablet, his expression wrapped with longing. "They're amazing, aren't they?" Grace commented as she dusted the bookshelves. Ethan quickly switched screens as though caught doing something forbidden. "Dad says I should focus on technology and science, things I can actually do." The words held such matter-of-fact acceptance that Grace felt a surge of indignation on his behalf. You know, my brother Miguel always said soccer is as much about what happens in your mind as what happens with your feet. The best players see possibilities others don't." Ethan considered this, then tentatively switched back to the soccer video. "Do you think he'd talk to me sometime? Your brother?" Miguel passed away. Grace caught herself remembering the household rules about avoiding certain topics around Ethan. "He's no longer with us, but I know lots about soccer." He made sure of that. Over the following days, Grace found reasons to spend time in Ethan's vicinity while completing her duties. They discussed soccer strategies and players, gradually expanding to other topics: books, science, his coding projects. Unlike the other staff who spoke to Ethan with careful pity or professional detachment, Grace treated him like any other bright, curious 8-year-old. It was during one of these casual conversations, 3 weeks into her employment, that Grace noticed something extraordinary. They were discussing a particularly exciting soccer match when Ethan gesticulated enthusiastically, and his right leg gave a slight, involuntary jerk. Grace froze, her cleaning cloth suspended in mid-air. Ethan hadn't seemed to notice. continuing his animated description of the game-winning goal. She forced herself to resume dusting, but kept watching from the corner of her eye. There it was again, a definite muscle contraction when Ethan became particularly excited. That night in her small apartment, Grace couldn't stop thinking about what she'd witnessed. According to Mrs. Winters, Ethan had been thoroughly examined by the world's top specialists, all concluding his condition was permanent. But what if they'd missed something? Grace opened her laptop and began researching spinal malformations, drawing on her limited medical knowledge from her hospital days. Hours turned into days of late-night research. She visited the public library during her days off, checking out books on neurology and pediatric medicine that she struggled to understand but diligently worked through. A pattern emerged in her research, cases where patients with similar diagnoses had experienced unexpected improvements following certain types of stimulation. The medical establishment often dismissed these as anomalies or misdiagnoses, but Grace found the similarities too compelling to ignore. She thought of Miguel, taken too soon by leukemia, and the promise she'd made at his bedside to carry on his spirit of never accepting defeat. Looking at Ethan, she saw the same fire her brother had possessed, a flame in danger of being extinguished by well-meaning adults who thought they knew the limits of possibility. Grace made her decision. She would help Ethan, even knowing she might lose her job in the process. Some risks were worth taking. Grace began her secret mission with subtle changes to her cleaning routine, ensuring she was assigned to Ethan's wing during his free periods between tutoring and therapy. She developed a system, dusting shelves while engaging him in increasingly animated conversations, watching carefully for those telltale muscle twitches. They were small, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably real. My grandmother in New Mexico was a curandera, a traditional healer, Grace told Ethan one afternoon as she organized his bookshelf. She believed that energy flowed through the body like rivers, and when blockages occurred, the right pressure in the right places could restore the flow. Ethan looked up from his tablet with interest. That sounds like pseudoscience, Grace laughed. Probably. But she also practiced therapeutic massage techniques that are recognized by modern medicine. She taught me some of them when I helped care for Miguel during his illness. Did they help him? Ethan asked. Grace's smile softened. They eased his pain and helped his circulation. Sometimes when science reaches its limits, it doesn't hurt to try something different. A week into her observations, Grace took a calculated risk. I have this game I used to play with my little cousins, she said casually while vacuuming near Ethan's desk. It's called Guess the Draw. Mind if I show you? Ethan shrugged, always eager for distraction. Sure. Grace knelt beside his wheelchair. I'll trace shapes on your hand, and you guess what I'm drawing. Then we switch. It was a simple enough game, but Grace's true purpose was to establish comfortable physical contact. From his hand, she gradually moved to his forearm over subsequent days, then his shoulder, building trust, normalizing touch. 3 weeks in, she finally reached her goal. Today's shape is trickier, she said lightly. It might help if I draw it here. She gestured to his leg, watching carefully for his reaction. Ethan hesitated only briefly before nodding. Okay. Grace began tracing gentle patterns on his calf through his jeans, incorporating subtle pressure techniques her grandmother had taught her. The first few times, Ethan reported feeling nothing. But Grace persisted, day after day, incorporating the game into their routine. I felt something weird yesterday, Ethan confided after 2 weeks of these sessions, like pins and needles in my feet when I woke up. It went away, though. Grace kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. Bodies do strange things sometimes, nothing to worry about. She intensified her research, spending her evenings at the library or huddled over her laptop in her apartment. She discovered a technique called neuromuscular facilitation used in some rehabilitation programs for patients with partial spinal cord injuries. The approach involved stimulating existing neural pathways rather than trying to regrow damaged nerves, working with what remained instead of lamenting what was lost. Grace created a notebook where she meticulously recorded her observations and ideas, carefully hiding it in her apartment. Each day, she introduced new games that were actually disguised therapeutic exercises, stretches masquerading as superhero poses, massage techniques presented as weather patterns she traced on his legs. "This is a thunderstorm," she would say, using her fingertips to create gentle percussion along his calves. "And this is the wind before the storm," she continued, applying long, sweeping pressure from his hips to his ankles. Ethan began looking forward to these sessions, never suspecting their true purpose. "You make cleaning take forever," he teased one afternoon. "Mrs. Winters would have finished an hour ago." "Mrs. Winters doesn't stop to appreciate your brilliant conversation," Grace replied with a wink, while working her fingers along pressure points in his feet, disguised as a stepping stones game. 2 months into her employment, Grace's diligence was rewarded with a breakthrough. During an especially animated discussion about his favorite soccer team's chances in the playoffs, Ethan gestured wildly, and his foot clearly flexed in response. This time, he noticed. His eyes widened in shock, fixing on his foot as if it belonged to someone else. "Did you see that?" he whispered, voice trembling. Grace maintained her composure with effort. "I did. Has that happened before?" "No, I don't think so. I don't know." Confusion and hope warred on his face. "Is it just a reflex? The doctors said I might have reflexes but not controlled movement." "Why don't you try to do it again?" Grace suggested gently. "Just think about moving your foot. Don't try too hard." Ethan's face scrunched in concentration. Nothing happened. "It's okay," Grace said quickly, seeing his disappointment. "Reflexes are complicated." But the incident marked a turning point. Grace accelerated her program, introducing more targeted exercises. She began arriving early for her shift and staying late, using her breaks to spend additional time with Ethan. She taught him visualization techniques, encouraging him to imagine electric currents flowing down his spine into his legs, while she performed the disguise therapy. "My grandma always said that the mind tells the body what's possible," she explained. "If you can imagine it clearly enough, sometimes your body starts to listen." One evening, as Grace was gathering her things to leave, Ethan called her back. "I've been practicing that thing you showed me," he said hesitantly, "the visualization, and I keep feeling these weird sensations, like my legs are waking up from being asleep for a long time." Grace sat down beside his wheelchair, heart pounding. "That's interesting. What kind of sensations?" "Tingling. Sometimes warmth. Yesterday, I felt an itch on my knee." His blue eyes searched hers. "Is that normal?" "I'm not a doctor, Ethan," Grace said carefully. "But new sensations aren't necessarily a bad thing." "Should I tell Dad?" Ethan asked, uncertainty clouding his features. "He's meeting with another specialist next week, some guy from Sweden who has a new surgical technique." Grace considered her response carefully. False hope could be cruel, but so could dismissing real progress. "Maybe wait a bit. See if the sensations continue or change. Sometimes our bodies do strange things that don't mean anything significant." She felt a twinge of guilt at the deception, but she wasn't ready to reveal her unauthorized intervention, not without more concrete results. The Parker household operated on a strict hierarchy, and she'd been explicitly warned against offering medical opinions. As the weeks passed, Ethan reported more frequent sensations. Grace intensified the exercises, now openly incorporating stretches and massage into their routine, under the guise of games and relaxation techniques. She showed him how to perform simple movements himself when she wasn't there, framing them as circulation exercises that his regular physical therapist had probably meant to show him. 3 months into her employment, Ethan made a confession that confirmed her hopes. "I can move my toes now," he whispered one afternoon, glancing toward the door to ensure they were alone. "Not a lot, and not every time I try, but sometimes they do exactly what I'm telling them to do." Grace struggled to contain her excitement. "Show me." Ethan concentrated, his face tense with effort. Slowly, gradually, the big toe on his right foot lifted slightly, then lowered. The movement was small but deliberate, undeniably voluntary. Ethan, that's amazing, Grace breathed, forgetting professional distance in her excitement. Please don't tell anyone, Ethan said quickly. Not yet. I want to be sure it's real before Dad finds out. He's been disappointed so many times. Grace understood completely. It's our secret. But Ethan, this is a big deal. We should probably document your progress somehow. That night, Grace created a second notebook, this one for Ethan to keep hidden in his room. In it, she outlined a more structured program of exercises, disguised as games they could continue in secret. She was walking a dangerous line, she knew, overstepping her role, potentially raising hopes that might be crushed. But the evidence before her eyes couldn't be denied. Something was changing in Ethan's condition, something the expensive specialists had missed. What Grace didn't know was that her unconventional methods had attracted attention. Mrs. Winters had begun to notice. Grace's extended time in Ethan's quarters, the hushed conversations that stopped when others entered the room. The household manager had built her career on anticipating problems before they emerged, and she sensed a disruption to the careful order she maintained. As Grace left the penthouse that evening, Mrs. Winters made a note in her daily report to Mr. Parker, a single line that would soon upend everything. Concerns regarding new housekeeper's inappropriate familiarity with Master Ethan. Recommend review of security footage. William Parker scrolled through emails on his phone, while half listening to the conference call on his laptop. Another acquisition was nearly complete, another billion added to the company's valuation. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, a familiar hollowness echoed within him. His executive assistant appeared at his office door, signaling an urgent matter. William nodded, muting himself on the call. Dr. Erickson's office called. They need to reschedule Ethan's consultation next week. The doctor has been called to an emergency case in Berlin. William pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration mounting. Find out when he'll be back. If it's more than a 2-week delay, look into flying us to Berlin instead. The assistant nodded and retreated. William unmuted his phone just as the discussion shifted to quarterly projections. Numbers and charts filled his screen, representing wealth beyond imagination, wealth that felt increasingly meaningless. Later that evening, William arrived home earlier than usual, hoping to have dinner with Ethan. He found his son in the media room watching soccer highlights with unusual intensity. "Hey, buddy," William said, loosening his tie. "How was therapy today?" Ethan startled slightly, quickly switching the screen to a science documentary. It was fine, just the usual stretches and stuff. William noticed the hasty change, but didn't comment. He'd long ago accepted that his son had developed a passion for a sport he could never play, another cruel twist in their already complicated life. William had consulted psychologists about whether to discourage this interest to protect Ethan from disappointment, but had ultimately decided to let his son find his own way of coping. "I thought we could have dinner together," William offered. "Chef Marcus made that pasta you like." Ethan smiled, but William caught a flicker of something in his expression. Nervousness? Guilt? It was gone before he could identify it. "Sounds great, Dad." During dinner, William noticed other subtle changes in his son. Ethan seemed more animated, his posture different somehow. When asked about school, he spoke enthusiastically about his science project, rather than with the resigned politeness that had become his norm. "Mrs. Winters mentioned you've been spending a lot of time with the new housekeeper," William said, casually watching for a reaction. Ethan's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Grace, yeah, she's cool. She knows a lot about soccer." "I see." William kept his tone neutral. "You know, buddy, the staff are here to do their jobs. They're not really friends." "Why not?" Ethan challenged, a flash of defiance that surprised William. "Because you pay them. Does that mean they can't be nice to me?" William backpedaled, taken aback by the response. "Of course they can be nice. I just don't want you getting too attached. Staff changes happen." Ethan's face clouded. "Are you firing Grace?" No, William assured him quickly. "I haven't even met her yet. I'm just saying in general." The conversation moved to safer topics, but William remained troubled by the exchange. After Ethan had gone to bed, he summoned Mrs. Winters to his study. "Tell me about this new housekeeper, Grace." Mrs. Winters' expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Grace Martinez, excellent references from her previous position at St. Mary's Hospital, very thorough with her duties. However, she hesitated. "Go on," William prompted. "She spends an unusual amount of time with Master Ethan. Their interactions seem unprofessional. She engages him in games and conversations that extend well beyond her cleaning duties." William frowned. "What kind of games?" "I'm not entirely certain. They stop when others enter the room." Mrs. Winters clasped her hands. "Mr. Parker, I hesitated to mention this, but yesterday I observed Ms. Martinez massaging Master Ethan's legs while discussing soccer strategies. When I inquired, she claimed it was a circulation exercise she remembered from her hospital work." William's frown deepened. "Ethan has a physical therapist. With multiple advanced degrees, we don't need a housekeeper experimenting on him." "Precisely my concern, sir. I want to see the security footage from Ethan's room for the past week." Mrs. Winters nodded. "I'll have it prepared immediately." Later, that night, William sat in his study reviewing the footage. What he saw disturbed him deeply. Grace Martinez systematically working with Ethan, performing what appeared to be unauthorized therapy. Stretches, pressure point techniques, massage, all while maintaining the pretense of casual conversation or games. William's initial anger gave way to cold fury when he saw Ethan attempting to move his foot on command. Was this woman giving his son false hope, creating the illusion of improvement where doctors had confirmed none was possible? The cruelty of it, whether intentional or born of ignorance, was unconscionable. He instructed Mrs. Winters to arrange a meeting with Grace the following morning. Grace arrived at work unaware of the storm brewing. She greeted the kitchen staff, cheerfully collected her cleaning supplies, and headed toward Ethan's wing. She was intercepted by Mrs. Winters. "Mr. Parker wishes to see you in his study." Immediately. Grace's stomach dropped, but she maintained her composure. Of course. William Parker was even more intimidating in person than his reputation suggested. He sat behind an imposing desk, his expression granite hard as Grace entered. "Ms. Martinez," he began without preamble, "would you care to explain why you've been performing unauthorized physical therapy on my son?" Grace's mind raced. Denial seemed pointless. The direct question suggested he had evidence. "Mr. Parker, I noticed responsive muscle movement in Ethan's legs that seemed inconsistent with his diagnosis. I've been encouraging those movements through techniques I learned during my work at St. Mary's." "You're a housekeeper, not a medical professional," William said coldly. "Ethan has been examined by the world's leading neurologists. His condition is permanent." "With all due respect, sir, I've observed—" "What you've observed is irrelevant," William cut her off. "What you're doing is dangerous and cruel. You're giving my son false hope based on meaningless reflexes that the doctors have already explained are not indicative of potential recovery." Grace felt her own anger rising. They're not just reflexes. Ethan can consciously control some movements. Now, small ones, but enough. William's fist came down on the desk. "I've watched the footage. I've seen your techniques. Do you have any idea how many experimental treatments we've tried? How many times Ethan's hopes have been raised and then crushed? Each disappointment takes something from him that I can't replace. If you just let me demonstrate." "Your employment is terminated effective immediately." William's voice was ice. "Mrs. Winters will provide your final payment. You are not to contact Ethan or return to this building." Grace stood her ground. "Mr. Parker, please, I understand your skepticism, but something is happening with Ethan that deserves investigation. At least consult with his doctors about the possibility." "Ms. Martinez," William interrupted, standing now. "I appreciate that you may believe you're helping, but you are interfering in matters beyond your understanding. Ethan's medical care is managed by a team of world-class specialists. Your amateur interventions end now." Grace realized further argument was futile. William Parker was a man accustomed to control, to buying solutions. The suggestion that a housekeeper had discovered something his millions had missed was too threatening. to his worldview. "May I say goodbye to Ethan?" she asked quietly. "No, that would only confuse him further. Mrs. Winters will explain your departure." Grace nodded stiffly, fighting back tears. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Mr. Parker, whatever you think of me, please watch Ethan carefully in the coming days. If you notice anything, any new movements or sensations, please consider having him re-evaluated." William didn't respond. His gaze already returned to his computer screen in clear dismissal. Grace collected her few personal items under Mrs. Winters' watchful eye. As she was escorted to the service elevator, she heard Ethan's voice from down the hall. "Grace, are you leaving early today?" He wheeled himself into view, confusion on his face, as he took in her expression and the small box in her arms. Before Grace could respond, Mrs. Winters stepped forward. "Ms. Martinez will no longer be working with us, Master Ethan. Please return to your studies." "What? Why?" Ethan looked from Mrs. Winters to Grace, panic rising in his voice. "Grace, what happened?" "I'm sorry, Ethan," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "Keep practicing those exercises we talked about, okay? Don't give up." "Ms. Martinez," Mrs. Winters warned sharply. "You're firing her?" Ethan's voice rose in disbelief. "Dad is firing Grace? Why?" Mrs. Winters placed a firm hand on Ethan's wheelchair. "Your father has made his decision. It's not for discussion." "This isn't fair," Ethan shouted, trying to maneuver around Mrs. Winters. "Grace is helping me. I need to talk to Dad." The elevator doors opened, and Grace was ushered inside. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Ethan's face, contorted with distress, as he struggled against Mrs. Winters' restraining. And in his study, William heard the commotion and closed his eyes in pain. He'd known Ethan would be upset. The boy had clearly formed an attachment to Grace, but the intensity of his reaction confirmed William's fear. The housekeeper had indeed been feeding his son false hope, creating an emotional dependence that would make the inevitable disappointment even more devastating. He steeled himself for the difficult conversation ahead. He would explain to Ethan again the reality of his condition. They would find another specialist, try another treatment. William would throw more money, more resources at the problem. Something would work, eventually. It had to. What William didn't expect was for his always compliant son to wheel himself into the study 20 minutes later, tears streaming down his face, and shout words that would shake him to his core. "She was helping me, Dad. I can feel my legs now, I can move my toes, and you sent her away because you'd rather believe I'll never get better than admit you might be wrong." The days following Grace's departure were the darkest the Parker penthouse had ever seen. Ethan refused to speak to his father, responding to William's attempts at conversation with stony silence or one-word answers. He rejected his tutoring sessions, physical therapy appointments, and even meals, taking only what was left outside his door, when hunger became too intense to ignore. William was at a loss. He'd faced hostile corporate takeovers and billion-dollar negotiations with less anxiety than he felt approaching his son's bedroom door each morning, only to be met with the same unyielding rejection. After 3 days of this standoff, William cancelled his meetings and called Dr. Bennett, Ethan's longtime psychologist. "He's convinced this housekeeper was helping him regain movement," William explained, pacing his study. "She had him believing he could control his toes, feel sensations in his legs. How do I make him understand that's impossible without crushing him completely?" Dr. Bennett's voice was measured over the speakerphone. "Children Ethan's age can be highly suggestible, especially when they desperately want something to be true. But the approach here isn't to make him understand anything. That frames you as adversaries. You need to validate his feelings while gently guiding him back to acceptance." William rubbed his temples. "And how exactly do I do that when he won't even look at me?" "Perhaps bring in a specialist to examine him again. If he believes he's experiencing new sensations, having a doctor confirm or explain them might help him process the reality." The suggestion was reasonable, but something held William back. Was it fear of subjecting Ethan to another disappointment? Or something deeper, a tiny, irrational whisper, asking, "What if?" No. William shut down the thought immediately. He'd consulted the finest medical minds on the planet, spent millions on experimental treatments. If there was any possibility of improvement, they would have found it. This housekeeper had done damage with her ignorant meddling, and now it fell to William to repair it. He arranged for Dr. Lowenstein, Ethan's neurologist, to visit the following day. The doctor's busy schedule had been rearranged with the application of a generous donation to his research foundation, one of the many ways William's wealth smoothed life's complications. When William informed Ethan about the appointment, he received only a mumbled whatever in response. That evening, the penthouse felt more like a mausoleum than a home. William sat alone at the massive dining table, the chef's expertly prepared meal tasteless in his mouth. Ethan had requested dinner in his room. Again. William's phone buzzed with a message from his COO about the Tokyo expansion. He started to respond, then stopped, setting the phone down. Work had always been his refuge, the place where problems had clear solutions. Apply enough money, enough strategic thinking, enough force of will, and obstacles fell away. But Ethan's condition had taught him the limits of his power in the most painful way possible. And now, this unbridgeable gap between them felt like another defeat he didn't know how to overcome. William abandoned his meal and walked to the window wall overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. From this height, the city looked like a circuit board of light and movement, orderly, programmable, under control. Nothing like the messy, unpredictable terrain of human emotions. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Jackson, the evening attendant, stood at the threshold. "Excuse me, Mr. Parker, there's something you should know." William turned. "What is it?" "It's about Ms. Martinez, sir. She's been coming to the service entrance every day since her dismissal, leaving notes for Master Ethan. The doorman has been turning her away, of course, but Roger, the gardener, he's been passing the notes along." William's jaw tightened. "I see. Thank you for bringing this to my attention." After Jackson departed, William stood motionless, anger and frustration warring within him. The woman's persistence was inappropriate, her continuing interference infuriating. And yet, Ethan had connected with her in a way he hadn't with anyone since Rebecca left. Was William's pride standing in the way of his son's happiness? Was protecting Ethan from false hope worth the withdrawal and depression he was currently experiencing? William made a decision. He needed to read those notes. He found Roger tending to the indoor plants in the East Wing solarium. The older man, startled when William addressed him directly, a rare occurrence in the rigid hierarchy of the household. "Mr. Parker, sir, can I help you with something?" "The notes from Miss Martinez. I'd like to see them." Roger paled visibly. "Sir, I didn't mean any—" William raised a hand. "I'm not interested in explanations or apologies, just the notes." Roger nodded quickly and disappeared, returning moments later with a small bundle of envelopes tied with string. "These are the ones he hasn't opened yet, sir. There were others." William took the bundle. "Thank you, that will be all." In his study, William untied the string and examined the simple white envelopes, each addressed to Ethan in neat handwriting. He hesitated only briefly before opening the first one. "Dear Ethan," it began, "I'm sorry I had to leave so suddenly. I want you to know that what we discovered together is real. Your body is waking up in ways the doctors didn't expect, and that's something to celebrate. Keep doing the exercises we practiced, especially the visualization techniques. Imagine the energy flowing down your spine into your legs. Picture yourself standing, walking, running. Your mind and body are connected in ways science doesn't fully understand yet. I believe in you. Grace." William opened another, then another. Each contained similar encouragement, specific exercises described as games, and unwavering belief in Ethan's potential for improvement. There was no bitterness toward William, no undermining of his authority, only genuine concern for Ethan's well-being and progress. The final note was different, shorter. "Ethan, I'll be at the coffee shop, across from Central Park South entrance every day, from 4 or 5 p.m. if your father ever wants to talk. I understand his skepticism and fear, I would feel the same in his position. But what's happening with you deserves to be explored, not dismissed. Stay strong. Grace. William set the notes down, conflicting emotions churning within him. The woman seemed sincere, her concern for Ethan genuine, but sincerity didn't equate to medical expertise. People with the best intentions could cause terrible harm through ignorance. Still, the exercises she described seemed harmless enough. Basic stretches, visualization, massage techniques. If they gave Ethan comfort, perhaps the kind thing would be to allow them, while maintaining realistic expectations about outcomes. William checked his watch. 3:45 p.m. The coffee shop was a 15-minute drive. He sat motionless for several minutes, weighing his options. Then he stood abruptly and called for his driver. The coffee shop was one of those artisanal places that had proliferated across Manhattan in recent years. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, baristas with elaborate tattoos. William felt conspicuously out of place in his tailored suit as he scanned the scattered tables. He spotted her in a corner, bent over a thick book, making notes in a spiral notebook. Without her uniform, in jeans and a simple sweater, she looked younger, less formal, but her concentration was intense, her focus complete. William approached her table. Ms. Martinez. Grace looked up, surprise flickering across her features before she composed herself. Mr. Parker, I didn't expect you to come. Neither did I. William remained standing, unwilling to commit to a conversation just yet. What are you reading? Grace turned the book so he could see the cover. Advances in Neuroplasticity and Spinal Cord Regeneration. Light afternoon reading. The sarcasm slipped out before he could stop it. Grace didn't flinch. I'm trying to understand what I've observed in Ethan. I know I'm not a doctor, but I've spent every free moment researching since I noticed his muscle responses. William studied her, searching for signs of deception or delusion. He found neither, only earnest determination. May I? He gestured to the chair opposite her. Please. William sat, his tall frame awkward at the small table. For a man accustomed to commanding rooms, he felt strangely uncertain. You've been leaving notes for my son. Yes, I was worried about him. He was making progress, and sudden interruption of the exercises could... Progress, William repeated, the word heavy with skepticism. Ms. Martinez, I've consulted specialists from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, hospitals in Switzerland, Germany, Japan. They've all examined Ethan's specific case extensively. The malformation in his spinal cord prevents neural signals from traveling to his lower extremities. That's not something that changes with stretches and visualization. Grace met his gaze directly. Then how do you explain his ability to move his toes on command? The new sensations he's reporting? These aren't random reflexes, Mr. Parker. They're coordinated, intentional movements. Children are suggestible. They want to please adults. Ethan might think he's feeling or doing things because you expect it, not because it's actually happening. With respect, sir, Ethan is one of the least suggestible children I've ever met. He questions everything, demands evidence. That's why I encouraged him to keep a journal of his sensations and movements, to document them objectively. This was new information. A journal, Grace nodded. It's in his nightstand drawer. He's been recording every new sensation, every successful movement with dates and times. It was his idea, actually. He said he wanted scientific proof to show the doctors. William felt a chill. If Ethan had been systematically documenting these experiences, if he truly believed he was making progress, Mr. Parker, Grace said gently, seeing his internal struggle. I know how this sounds. I know the position it puts you in. But is there any harm in having Ethan reevaluated? In exploring the possibility, however remote, that something unexpected is happening. William considered her question carefully. The financial cost of additional testing was irrelevant. The emotional cost to Ethan of another disappointment, however, was immeasurable. But then so was the cost of dismissing genuine progress if such a thing were actually occurring. I have a neurologist visiting tomorrow, William said finally. We'll see what he says. Grace's face brightened. That's wonderful. May I ask which tests he'll be performing? I don't know the specifics. Dr. Lowenstein has been Ethan's neurologist for years. He's familiar with the case. Something flickered in Grace's expression. Dr. Lowenstein has a very traditional approach to spinal cord injuries. Would you consider bringing in someone with expertise in neuroplasticity as well? There's been remarkable research in that field recently. William's eyes narrowed. Are you presuming to tell me how to manage my son's medical care? No, sir. I'm suggesting a complementary perspective. Medicine advances constantly. Sometimes specialists become committed to particular diagnoses and miss new possibilities. William stood, signaling the end of the conversation. I'll take that under advisement. Good day, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Parker, Grace called as he turned to leave. Whatever you decide about me, please don't give up on Ethan's potential. He's an extraordinary boy with incredible determination. He deserves every chance. William didn't respond, but her words followed him to the sleek car waiting at the curb. That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, William stood outside his son's room, torn between respecting his privacy and needing to know the truth. Finally, he quietly opened the door and approached the nightstand. The journal was where Grace had said it would be, a composition notebook filled with Ethan's neat handwriting. William took it back to his study and began to read. The entries started 3 months earlier, around the time Grace had begun working in their home. Initial notes described weird tingling and pins and needles sensations. Later entries documented specific achievements. Moved right big toe 3 times today. Felt cold when Grace put ice pack on my knee. Actual cold, not just pressure. The most recent entry from the day before Grace's dismissal read, Big news! Flex my whole foot today. Grace says my brain is remembering how to talk to my legs. Can't wait to show Dad when I can do more. Want it to be really good before I tell him so he won't be disappointed again. William closed the journal, a tightness in his chest making it difficult to breathe. The entries were too detailed, too specific to be fabricated. Ethan believed something was changing, believed it with the wholehearted conviction of which only children are capable. And if Ethan believed it so completely, could William do any less? Dr. Lowenstein arrived at precisely 10 a.m. the following day, his thin frame draped in an expensive suit that couldn't disguise his academic bearing. He'd been Ethan's neurologist since diagnosis, a man of impeccable credentials and equally impeccable certainty. William, he greeted with a professional handshake. You sounded concerned on the phone. Has Ethan experienced complications? William led him to the study. Not complications exactly, some unexpected developments. He explained the situation as objectively as possible, the housekeeper's observations, Ethan's journal, the reported sensations and movements. As he spoke, Dr. Lowenstein's expression shifted from polite interest to barely concealed skepticism. Phantom sensations are quite common in cases like Ethan's, the doctor said when William finished. The brain sometimes fills in missing sensory information, creating the illusion of feeling. As for the movements, children are remarkably adaptable. Ethan may have developed compensatory movements using his upper body muscles that create the appearance of lower limb activity. But what if it's more than that? William pressed. What if something is changing? Dr. Lowenstein sighed, removing his glasses to polish them methodically. William, we've been through this. Ethan's condition was thoroughly documented with advanced imaging. The malformation interrupts the neural pathways. It's not something that spontaneously improves. But you haven't examined him recently. Things change. Science advances. Of course, the doctor conceded. That's why I'm here. I'll conduct a full assessment. But William, he replaced his glasses, his expression gentle but firm. I caution you against investing too heavily in these reports. The mind is powerful, especially when hope is involved. Your housekeeper, however well-intentioned, may have inadvertently created a situation where Ethan believes he's experiencing improvement when he's simply becoming more attuned to normal autonomic reflexes. William nodded, tamping down his frustration. Just examine him with an open mind, that's all I ask. Ethan was waiting in his room, his expression guarded, when William entered with Dr. Lowenstein. Hey buddy, you remember Dr. Lowenstein? He's here to check how you're doing. Ethan's eyes flicked between them. Is this because of what I told you, about feeling things in my legs? Yes, William admitted. I want to understand what's happening. Doctor. Lowenstein approached with his practiced professional smile. Hello, Ethan. Your father tells me you've been having some new experiences with sensation and movement. That must be exciting. Ethan didn't return the smile. Are you going to tell me it's all in my head? Because it's not. I can show you. I'm here to observe and assess, the doctor replied smoothly. Why don't we start with a basic examination? For the next hour, Dr. Lowenstein performed a series of tests, checking reflexes, testing for sensation with various stimuli, asking Ethan to attempt movements. William watched intently, noting the concentration on his son's face as he struggled, to demonstrate the abilities he'd recorded in his journal. Several times, Ethan's toes definitely moved, small, strained movements that required visible effort. But Dr. Lowenstein's expression remained neutral, revealing nothing. Can you feel this? The doctor asked, pressing a pointed instrument against Ethan's foot. Yes, Ethan responded confidently. It's sharp, right at the arch. Dr. Lowenstein made a note, then tested several more areas, some of which Ethan reported feeling, others not. Finally, the doctor straightened. Well, Ethan, you've been very cooperative, thank you. I'd like to speak with your father now, if that's all right. You can talk in front of me, Ethan insisted. It's my body. William intervened gently. Ethan, please, just a few minutes. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed, and the adult stepped into the hallway. Well? William asked immediately. Dr. Lowenstein's expression was measured. There are some reflexive responses present, and Ethan's subjective reports of sensation are interesting. However, the pattern of responses doesn't align with typical neural recovery. The movements I observed appear to be primarily autonomic reflexes rather than volitional control. But he moved his toes when you asked. You saw it. I saw what appeared to be movement following intense concentration and effort. This could be the result of muscle memory, phantom impulses, or even subtle movements of his upper body, creating the illusion of lower limb activity. William's frustration mounted. So you're saying nothing has changed? That this is all what? Imagination? Wishful thinking? Dr. Lowenstein sighed. I'm saying we should be extremely cautious about interpretation. The human desire for improvement can manifest in powerful ways. I'd recommend continuing with his established therapy regimen and perhaps adding some psychological support to help Ethan process these experiences without developing unrealistic expectations. And if I want a second opinion? That's certainly... You're right. I can recommend several colleagues who specialize in pediatric spinal conditions. William nodded curtly. Please do, and I'd like to schedule another MRI as soon as possible. So, of course, Dr. Lowenstein hesitated. William, I understand how much you want this to be real, but preparing Ethan for disappointment might be the kindest approach here. After the doctor left, William returned to Ethan's room, finding his son staring defiantly out the window. He didn't believe me, did he? Ethan asked without turning. William sat on the edge of the bed. He observed some responses but isn't sure how to interpret them. He thinks I'm making it up, or that it's just reflexes. Ethan's voice was bitter. Grace believed me. She saw what was happening before I even noticed it myself. William measured his next words carefully. I've scheduled an MRI for next week, and I'm getting other opinions. We'll figure this out, buddy. Ethan finally turned to face his father, hope warring with suspicion in his expression. Does that mean Grace can come back? She knows how to help me. William hesitated. I need to think about that. The medical decisions need to be made by professionals. She is a professional. She worked in a hospital. And she knows more about me than those doctors who see me for 10 minutes every few months. There was truth in Ethan's words that William couldn't deny. Whatever her formal qualifications, Grace Martinez had observed something in his son that an army of specialists had missed. I'll consider it, William said finally. But first I want you to show me what you can do. The movements and sensations you've been writing about in your journal. Ethan's eyes widened. You read my journal? Yes. I needed to understand what was happening. William met his son's gaze directly. I'm sorry for invading your privacy, but I'm trying to do what's best for you. After a moment of consideration, Ethan nodded. Okay, I'll show you, but it works better with Grace. She knows the right pressure points and stuff. For the next 20 minutes, William watched as Ethan demonstrated his emerging abilities. Tiny movements, inconsistent but unmistakably intentional. Some attempts failed, frustrating Ethan visibly, but others succeeded, bringing a triumphant glow to his face that William hadn't seen in years. It's easier when I do the visualization first, Ethan explained, his face scrunched in concentration as he successfully flexed his foot slightly. Grace taught me to imagine electricity flowing down my spine, waking up the sleeping parts. William's throat tightened. There was no denying what he was seeing. Whatever the medical explanation, his son was experiencing something real. Something that had brought him more hope and determination than all the expensive treatments William had pursued. That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, William sat in his study contemplating his next move. The rational part of him still insisted on scientific validation, on expert opinions and rigorous testing. But another part, the part that had seen the light return to his son's eyes, was growing increasingly difficult to ignore. He picked up his phone and made the call he'd been avoiding all day. Ms. Martinez, this is William Parker. I'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning to work with Ethan under certain conditions. 3 days later, Grace Martinez entered the Parker penthouse, not as a housekeeper but as a rehabilitation aide. William had laid out strict parameters. All sessions would be recorded for review by medical professionals. Grace would document every technique and observation, and Ethan's doctors would have final say on treatment plans. Grace had agreed to everything without hesitation, adding only one condition of her own. William needed to participate in some sessions, to understand the approach and techniques firsthand. Ethan's reaction to Grace's return was transformative. The sullen withdrawal of the previous days vanished, replaced by eager anticipation as they resumed their work together, now conducted openly in the penthouse's gym, rather than disguised as games during cleaning hours. William observed the first session from a distance, watching as Grace guided Ethan through visualization exercises, followed by targeted massage and gentle movement attempts. Her methods were unorthodox but systematic, combining elements of traditional physical therapy with techniques she attributed to her grandmother's healing practices. The key is reconnecting mind and body, Grace explained later when Ethan was resting. Modern medicine focuses so much on the physical pathway that sometimes it neglects the power of mental pathways. My grandmother always said healing flows in both directions. William remained skeptical, but couldn't deny the results, unfolding before his eyes. Ethan's movements, while still limited, were becoming more consistent. The MRI had shown no structural changes to explain the improvement, leaving his medical team baffled, but unwilling to dismiss the documented progress. A week into the new arrangement, Grace persuaded William to participate more directly in a Bay session. Ethan responds best when he feels supported and believed in, she said. Your involvement would mean everything to him. Reluctantly, William agreed. He felt awkward at first, following Grace's instructions to help with stretches and stabilization exercises. But as the session progressed, something shifted. For the first time, William wasn't observing Ethan's condition as a problem to be solved by others. He was actively engaged, feeling the small tensions and releases in his son's muscles, witnessing the tremendous effort behind each tiny movement. "Dad, look!" Ethan exclaimed during one exercise, managing to lift his foot slightly off the support cushion. The movement was small but unmistakable, a deliberate response to Ethan's focused intention. William felt something crack open inside him, a rigid barrier of scientific certainty, giving way to simple human hope. He met his son's triumphant gaze with matching intensity. "I see it, buddy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I see what you're doing." That night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, William found Grace organizing her notes in the study. "I need to understand," he said without preamble. How did you see this possibility when none of the specialists did? Grace considered the question carefully. I think sometimes specialists are looking for specific patterns they've been trained to recognize. I had no preconceptions, I just observed Ethan as he was, not as his diagnosis said he should be. But you had some medical knowledge from your hospital work. Grace nodded. Yes, but more importantly, I had experience with my brother Miguel. Before he left us, the doctors said his condition was hopeless too, but my grandmother's techniques gave him comfort and improved his quality of life when traditional medicine couldn't. William absorbed this. You mentioned your grandmother often. Was she some kind of healer? She was a curandera, a traditional healer in our community. Many doctors dismissed her methods as superstition, but I saw results that couldn't be explained away. She taught me that the body has wisdom beyond what science has mapped, and that healing comes in many forms. And you think that's what's happening with Ethan? Some kind of alternative healing? I think Ethan's body is finding pathways that weren't completely destroyed. The visualization helps him reconnect with those pathways, and the physical techniques support that process. Grace met his gaze directly. I don't claim to understand exactly how it works, I just know that it is working. William nodded slowly. Tomorrow, I want you to show me everything, every technique, every exercise. I want to learn how to help him myself. Grace's smile was warm with approval. That's the best medicine Ethan could possibly receive, his father's belief and participation. The weeks that followed marked a profound transformation in the Parker household. The once sterile penthouse hummed with new energy as one of the guest wings was converted into a comprehensive rehabilitation center, equipped with the latest therapy technology alongside spaces for the holistic practices Grace had introduced. William rearranged his schedule dramatically, delegating more responsibility to his executive team to spend afternoons working with Ethan and Grace. What began as awkward attempts to follow Grace's instructions evolved into a genuine partnership, with William increasingly attuned to his son's responses and needs. You're a natural, Grace observed one afternoon as William perfectly executed a series of facilitation techniques they'd been practicing. You have good instincts. William shook his head, smiling. I have good teachers. He glanced at Ethan, who was resting between exercises. Both of you. The most remarkable change, however, was in Ethan himself. The progress with his physical movement continued, small but unmistakable improvements that defied his original prognosis. He could now reliably move his feet and had begun experiencing increased sensation throughout his legs. But the more profound transformation was in his spirit. The quiet resignation that had shadowed him for years had given way to determined optimism. Dr. Lowenstein remained cautiously skeptical, but couldn't deny the documented improvements. I've consulted with colleagues about Ethan's case, he admitted during a follow-up visit. There are rare instances of incomplete spinal malformations where alternative neural pathways can be established through intensive stimulation. It's not well understood, but it appears Ethan may be one of these exceptional cases. William had assembled a new medical team that included specialists in neuroplasticity and pediatric rehabilitation, all working in consultation with Grace, to develop a comprehensive program tailored to Ethan's unique situation. The approach combined traditional physical therapy with Grace's intuitive techniques, carefully documented and refined through trial and error. Grace herself had undergone a transformation as well. No longer a housekeeper, she'd become an integral part of Ethan's care team, her natural aptitude for therapeutic work recognized and valued. William had offered to fund her formal education in physical therapy, an opportunity she'd accepted with tearful gratitude. My brother would be so proud, she told William one evening after a particularly successful session where Ethan had maintained a standing position for nearly 30 seconds with minimal support. He always said my hands were meant for healing. Your brother was right, William replied, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you've done for Ethan, for both of us really. You don't need to thank me. Seeing Ethan progress is all the reward I need. As Ethan's 9th birthday approached, William planned a small celebration. Despite the significant improvements, he was careful not to create pressure or expectations. Every milestone was celebrated, but the focus remained on Ethan's journey rather than specific outcomes. The morning of the birthday, William found Ethan already awake, sitting in his wheelchair by the window. "Happy birthday, buddy," William said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan looked up with an expression of unusual seriousness. "Dad, I want to try something. Today, at the party." "What's that?" "I want to try to walk just a few steps from my chair to you." William's heart lurched. "Ethan, there's no rush. The progress you've made is already incredible. We have time." "I know," Ethan said with quiet determination. "But I've been practicing with Grace when you're in meetings. I think I can do it. Just a few steps. I want to try." William hesitated. The protective instinct to shield Ethan from disappointment warred with respect for his son's growing autonomy and determination. "Have you discussed this with Grace?" he asked finally. Ethan nodded. "She says it's my decision. That I'll know when I'm ready." William knelt to meet his son's eyes. "Then we'll prepare for it. But Ethan, no matter what happens, whether you take those steps today or a year from now, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Your courage, your determination, it's taught me more than you can imagine." The party was intentionally small. Just a few of Ethan's friends from school, his favorite teachers, the household staff who had become like family, and of course, Grace. The penthouse was decorated with a space theme reflecting Ethan's fascination with astronomy, and Chef Marcus had outdone himself with a cake shaped like the Mars rover. Throughout the celebration, William noticed Ethan's unusual quietness. While he smiled and thanked everyone for their gifts, his gaze kept drifting to the center of the room, measuring the distance between his wheelchair and various points, as if making calculations. After the cake had been served and the candles blown out, Ethan caught William's eye and gave a small nod. William understood immediately. He moved to the center of the room and cleared his throat. "Everyone, Ethan has something he'd like to share with you all." The room quieted as attention turned to the birthday boy. Grace moved discreetly to position herself near Ethan's wheelchair, ready to assist if needed. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his voice stronger and more confident than William had ever heard it. "Most of you know that I've been working really hard on my therapy. For a long time, everyone thought I would never walk. But Grace helped me discover that maybe they were wrong. And my dad helped me believe it was possible." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Today I want to try something I've been practicing. I might not make it, and that's okay. But I want to try." A hush fell over the room as Ethan positioned his wheelchair about 6 feet from where William stood. Grace helped him into the leg braces they'd been using for standing exercises, then stepped back, giving him space while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. With deliberate movements, Ethan locked the wheelchair's brakes and positioned his hands on the armrests. The room was so quiet that William could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He wanted to rush forward to help, to ensure Ethan wouldn't fall, but he forced himself to remain still, honoring his son's moment. Slowly, with tremendous effort visible in every line of his small body, Ethan pushed himself upright. A soft gasp rippled through the onlookers as he achieved a standing position, stabilized by the braces, but undeniably supporting weight on his legs. For a moment, he simply stood there, swaying slightly, his face a mask of intense concentration. Then, with agonizing slowness, he shifted his right foot forward an inch, then another inch. His left foot followed, the movement jerky but unmistakably intentional. William found himself holding his breath, his vision blurring with unshed tears. 1 step, 2 steps, each one a miracle that medical science had declared impossible. Ethan's face gleamed with perspiration, his teeth gritted with effort, but his eyes remained locked on his father's, drawing strength from the connection between them. 3 steps. 4. William could see his son's legs trembling with exertion, threatening to buckle. "You've got this, buddy," he whispered, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "I'm right here." The final 2 steps were the hardest, Ethan's energy clearly flagging. But with a surge of determination that William felt as a physical force between them, Ethan closed the distance and collapsed into his father's waiting arms. The room erupted in applause and cheers, but William barely heard them. He was on his knees holding his son, both of them shaking with emotion too powerful for words. "I did it, Dad," Ethan whispered against his shoulder. "I walked to you." "You did, buddy. You absolutely did." William's voice broke, tears flowing freely now. "You're the bravest person I've ever known." Over Ethan's shoulder, William met Grace's gaze. She stood a few feet away, her own cheeks wet with tears, hands clasped over her heart. He mouthed 2 words to her: "Thank you." She shook her head slightly, gesturing back to the 2 of them, father and son embracing in the center of the room, as if to say, "This is all you. This is what matters." And William understood. It wasn't just Ethan who had been transformed by this journey. William himself had changed fundamentally, learning to trust beyond the boundaries of established science, to believe in possibilities rather than limitations, to be present in ways that mattered more than any corporate acquisition or billion-dollar deal. 5 years later. The auditorium at Columbia University Medical Center was filled to capacity for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the Parker Institute for Pediatric Neurological Rehabilitation. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, illuminating the state-of-the-art facility designed to bring innovative treatment approaches to children with spinal cord injuries and malformations. William Parker stood at the podium, surveying the assembled crowd of medical professionals, potential patients and their families, donors and press. 5 years ago, he began, I believed that my son's condition was unchangeable. I had consulted the finest specialists, pursued the most advanced treatments, and accepted their unanimous conclusion. Ethan would never walk. I believed in science, in expertise, in the power of wealth to solve problems. He paused, his gaze finding Ethan in the front row, now 14, tall for his age, using forearm crutches that allowed him to walk independently for moderate distances. What I failed to understand was that sometimes the most profound insights come from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person who sees possibility where others see only limitation isn't the one with the most impressive credentials, but the one with the clearest vision. Grace sat beside Ethan, no longer a housekeeper, but the newly graduated director of holistic therapy at the Institute, her natural talents now reinforced by formal education funded by the Parker Foundation. The Parker Institute represents a new approach to neurological rehabilitation, one that integrates traditional medical practice with complementary techniques, that values the wisdom of diverse healing traditions, and that never ever gives up on a child's potential for improvement. William gestured to the team of specialists assembled on stage, neurologists, physical therapists, researchers, many of whom had initially been skeptics but had been won over by the documented results of their integrated approach. Together, we've developed protocols that have helped dozens of children achieve improvements, their original prognoses declared impossible. We've published peer-reviewed research that is changing how the medical community approaches certain spinal conditions. And today, we open this facility to ensure that these approaches are available to every child who might benefit, regardless of their family's financial resources. After the ceremony, as guests toured the facility, William found a quiet moment with Grace and Ethan. "So, Dr. Martinez, what do you think?" William asked, gesturing to the rehabilitation spaces designed with Grace's direct input. She smiled, her confidence a far cry from the nervous housekeeper who had entered his penthouse years ago. "It's perfect, a place where science and intuition can work together instead of in opposition." Ethan, who had recently begun training as a peer mentor for younger patients, nodded in agreement. "The kids are going to love the adaptive sports area, especially the rock climbing wall." William watched his son with quiet pride. Ethan's journey hadn't been easy. There had been plateaus, setbacks, days of frustration and exhaustion. His mobility would never be what it might have been without the malformation. But he had defied every limitation placed upon him, reimagining possibility with each new achievement. "Your mother called this morning," William told him. "She's flying in next week to see the Institute. She's very proud of you." Rebecca's reappearance in their lives had been another unexpected development. tentative at first, then increasingly present as she witnessed the changes in both her son and her ex-husband. The relationship remained complicated, but healing had begun there too. As they walked through the sunlit corridors of the Institute, William matching his pace to Ethan's measured steps, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. How a simple housekeeper had changed everything by seeing what an army of specialists had missed. How a father's desperation had given way to genuine partnership and presence. How a boy's determination had rewritten medical expectations. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" Ethan asked, pausing to rest against a wall. "That first day when Grace asked me if I liked soccer. If she hadn't asked that question, if she'd just dusted the shelves and left, none of this would have happened." William nodded, the significance of that moment not lost on him. Sometimes the biggest miracles start with the smallest connections. "And sometimes," Grace added, her eyes warm with the wisdom that had guided them all, "the people who change our lives the most are the ones we least expect." As they continued their tour of the facility that would help countless children rewrite their own stories of limitation, William knew that the greatest wealth he'd ever accumulated wasn't in his bank accounts or corporate holdings. It was in the steps his son could take, in the community they'd built, in the lives they would touch through this institute, and in the profound understanding that sometimes the most powerful force for change isn't money or science or expertise, but simply the courage to see possibility where others have stopped looking. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by William, Ethan, and Grace's journey of hope and transformation. Stories like these remind us that miracles often come from unexpected places, and that we should never stop believing in possibilities. If you've enjoyed this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that will touch your heart and inspire your soul. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's complexities and the power of human connection. Join our community by sharing your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what moments in this story touched you the most. Until our next story, remember that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with a single act of belief.